Rabbi, you should be ashamed of yourself. Those were the first words I heard as I arrived at the graveside at an open grave in a cemetery in Long Island where I was doing a funeral. What was the background? Was I late to the cemetery? No. Let me take you a week before that where I was at. There was a very, very precious man who was on the older side laying in the hospital. I visited him there, and there were not many family members, and they didn't have an affiliation with a synagogue, so I had the privilege of being in touch with the family before he passed away. And then once he passed away, I was asked if I would do the funeral. Now, unfortunately, the man did not have many family members and didn't have any children, was not affiliated with any synagogue or any Jewish institution. And so arranging a funeral was not easy because we didn't have a minyan. We didn't have a quorum of 10 people to make the funeral. I posted on social media. I tried to see who can come, but unfortunately, it seemed like there would be no minyan. We wouldn't even have someone to say Kaddish for him. Even though he had no children, there would be no one who would say Kaddish later. I thought maybe at least at the funeral we can get someone to say Kaddish, but we couldn't even get that. To make things worse, once I arrived at the cemetery, there were very few people, and of the few people that were coming, one of them got not one, but a double flat tire. Now, I've never heard of a flat tire happening in the past few years because thank God cars are better and the roads are better and we don't have flat tires like we had in the past. But in this really strange way, one of the friends, the neighbors that was coming, got a flat tire. And so the funeral was getting delayed. And when I came, there was one other person there for the funeral, someone who came as a chesed from the Five Towns, and they were there to help make a minyan. As the funeral director arrives and as the family arrive, it becomes clear that we won't have a minyan, but everyone is coming on the late side, and we start preparing to go to the graveside. Suddenly, a person who was very close with the family of the man who passed away, we lost sight of her, and she wasn't to be seen. And so I called her, and all the paperwork cleared. The funeral director got in the car, drove off, and by the time the close friend came, and I was taking her in my car from the office of the funeral home to where the burial would be, the procession already left, the hearse left, and so we were left looking for them. Now, it's a big cemetery, but not infinite, and so we figured between Google Maps, a map of the cemetery, live location that you can do now on your phone, you can drop live location, we would have an easy time finding them. But absolutely no, a disaster. We were driving up and down the cemetery. It was really frustrating because we knew we were a minute away, but we couldn't find it. We were driving up and down and up and down and up and down, and nothing. And finally, they came searching for us. We went back to the office of the funeral house. Eventually, we arrived at the graveside a half hour later. Now, this is with a minute drive, and so by the time I arrive at the graveside, at the open grave, the non-Jewish funeral director that's there looked at me livid, and he says, "Rabbi, you should be ashamed of yourself." I look around and I see an extraordinary thing. By the time I got there, we had a minyan. Why? Because the person who had his car break down and had a flat tire, he had a Hasidic driver, and then more people came from the Five Towns, and then there was a Orthodox couple there on the side praying, so we asked them to join, and somehow at the moment that I arrived, that's when we had our 10th man to say a minyan, to have a minyan to say Kaddish, and we said Kaddish, and it would be the only time, because there were no children, the only time Kaddish was said. And to me, it was a modern day miracle because there was no chance, not the slightest chance for a minyan. And somehow between the car breaking down and getting an Orthodox driver, a Jewish driver, and the people there in the cemetery, and the people who volunteered to come, and then the people that they brought once they realized there would be no minyan, that was a modern day miracle. And we ended up having a minyan for this man. And so often we look for God in our day-to-day lives, and it's hard to see miracles the way people saw in the past. But you should know that miracles still do happen, and as they say, right, there can be miracles. And it was absolutely amazing that this man who passed away, and there was no chance for having a minyan to say any kind of kaddish for him, ended up happening. And it shows you the imperative and importance of remembrance, of sanctifying the memory of someone who passed away. And that's what Yizkor is all about. It's about remembering a person who passed away and making sure that their legacy continues, that God's name is sanctified. And nothing speaks about the importance of memorializing the legacy of someone who passed away like the book of Ruth, where it's not only about kindness to the living, but as the verse explicitly says, it's about kindness with the living and with the dead. It's kindness with the living and with the dead. Ruth does kindness with her deceased husband by continuing his path. They do kindness with Elimelech, who passed away, by redeeming his field. And that is what Yizkor is about. It's about making sure that the sacred task of carrying on the memory of those who came before us is carried on. So Be'ezrat Hashem, God willing, we should be fortunate enough to live long and happy lives, but also we must make sure to remember those who are no longer with us and to carry their memory with us. And that is why we say Yizkor, may God remember, as we continue their legacy.